All right, mellowing on medical marijuana. What does it mean? Well, you heard this week from the U.S. Attorney General that now there are going to be fewer federal prosecutions of people who are using medical marijuana in states, 13 states where it is perfectly legal in which to do so. Well, now there are a lot of expressed concerns about, will this open up the gateway for the decriminalization of street drugs? Well, here are some of the worries that you expressed on the street.
I think it's a good idea. I have a friend that's using it right now. She's going through cancer treatments, and it's helping her immensely.
I'm definitely against it, because I don't think the government can enforce the rules that's going to go on. I think it's just going to broaden out, it's going to get out of hand, and I just don't think that it's a good move.
Makes absolute sense to me. We waste a lot of resources prosecuting victimless crime like that.
I really don't think it's a good idea. I think that there might be a misuse of it.
I think if the federal government steps back, it may actually allow other states to be less fearful of repercussions, and so look more into the research that's available for medical marijuana use.
All right, we're hearing from you as well at home on my blog and on Facebook. We'll get to some of your questions and comments and pose them to some of our invited guests. Right now, let me reintroduce to you Dr. Alan Frankel, who writes recommendations for patients for medical marijuana. Good to see you. And Ron Brooks, president of the National Narcotics Officers Association's Coalition. Good to see you as well. All right, Dr. Frankel, let me begin with you because a lot of folks still unclear about why would I want marijuana in medicinal ways. What kind of ailments are we talking about being treated by medicinal marijuana?
Well, in my practice in Marina del Rey, to begin with, the patients that I see have an average age of 48, and I don't see anybody under 21. So that helps the practice a lot. The types of patients I see are often, in about a third of the cases, referred from physicians in the West Los Angeles area, internists, psychiatrists, neurologists, pain doctors, rheumatologists, and I'm working closely with a lot of the doctors in the area. Patients that come in generally are not feeling great. If they were feeling terrific from typical pharmaceuticals, they generally wouldn't be coming in, at least.
And we're talking about in the form of pain relief. We're not saying that medical marijuana is being prescribed or recommended for healing purposes or as treatment, but instead really in most part for pain relief.
Well, pain relief is certainly a major use for it, but in my practice, and actually I brought a sample, cannabis in tincture form is the way I train my patients to use it. Hold it up because we can't see it. Is that better?
Okay, yes.
It's a little bottle that's not very scary. It has a liquid in it that was first made 4,000 years ago.
How would that be applied or ingested?
This is sprayed or dropped underneath the tongue in a homeopathic manner because smoking is not the type of medication use that I encourage my patients to do.
Right.
It doesn't mean that nobody smokes, but people can use medications correctly or they can use medications incorrectly.
Okay.
One of the beauties here is that even if they use it incorrectly, they will not get addicted, or at least not get addicted, at worst case, more than a caffeine type of withdrawal, which is and it's very safe. There's never been a reported death, and there never will be, because cannabis doesn't affect our ability to breathe or keep our heart going.
All right, Kate, Ron Brooks, with the National Narcotics Officers Association, explain to me what your concerns are, because it's not that you want to argue whether it does have medicinal properties or not, but instead you're talking about public safety, and your concerns go along the lines of, what about those who are not using? How safe are they around people who are using?
Well, that is exactly the issue. I mean, first of all, there's always the discussion that nobody's ever died from marijuana, but if you look at emergency room admissions, as studied in the Dawn study, which looks at targeted cities, emergency room admissions for marijuana has tripled over the last 8 years. In fact, 120,000 admissions, exceeding those for heroin. And there's the highway safety aspect. I mean, we know in America that at least 8,000 Americans are killed by drugged drivers, not drunk drivers, drug drivers, and another 500,000 are maimed or injured.
So your concern, if you're someone who's using marijuana for medicinal purposes, you get behind the wheel or you're operating some sort of machinery, etc., you're concerned that their judgment is impaired, their ability is impaired. And so, doctor, what is the response to that? Because surely you've heard that a lot. Your patients who are being recommended this drug have heard it a lot.
Well, I think there's one extremely basic point under cannabis in medical cannabis legally, that very few people understand. There's people, I think in general, understand cannabis, but it's indica cannabis to be a very sedating medication that helps with sleep and severe pain. That's not the type of cannabis I generally recommend to my patients. We deal primarily with sativa strains. And in ancient Sanskrit, sativa is daytime, indica is nighttime. If you use a nighttime, it's like a sleeping pill, to go drive, you're going to be in trouble. You use a sativa, and although most people are not familiar with this, it's, I think, beyond any question, you become focused, alert. It helps still substantially with pain, and you don't have to smoke. You can dose it a drop at a time or a spritz at a time under your tongue. And after seeing over 2,500 patients and all of them using tinctures at some point or another, this is a medicinal way to use cannabis.
So I wonder, Ron, does it matter to you how it's administered? If it weren't smoked, if it were applied in these other ways, like with the dropper, the doctor was talking about, would that, in your view, make a difference in terms of, the ratio of the use? There are more people who are actually using it with the drops than there would be those who are smoking it for medicinal purposes. Make a difference to you?
Well, I mean, the problem is that people are smoking it. Most people are smoking it. And it goes back to Dr. Voth's point. We have now regulated the use of medicine at the ballot box. I mean, if we were going to do that, if those that were old enough to remember Laetrile, 14 states regulated peach pits for the treatment of cancer, and we found that there was no efficacy. We're making decisions relative to people's health at the ballot box based on emotion and not based on science and education. The 1999 Institute of Medicine study clearly showed that while there may be some beneficial components of cannabinoids, there certainly will never be a benefit to smoking or otherwise using crude marijuana. You can't control the dose, you can't control the impurities, and we can't control the intoxicating effect. And lastly, with all due respect, and I think Dr. Voth as a scientist could weigh in on this, this difference between sativa and indica is hogwash. It doesn't exist. Marijuana is marijuana.
But I think at this point, we're not necessarily going to be arguing whether it is effective or not, because at this point, there are 13 states that already say they've given the green light to it. But now with this federal lifting or mellowing of regulations on pursuing people in a prosecutorial way, this really might mean that more states might get a little bit more serious about considering joining the bandwagon of those 13. So I wonder, Ron and Doctor, I know you've probably seen this before, but Ron, if you're familiar with the journey of going to a dispensary. I saw this for the first time when looking at this iReport and reading about people who are going to these dispensaries. At the top of the show, we showed this one young man, Rob Cabrera. He talked about how at ease he felt about going to a dispensary to get his marijuana to alleviate his back pain. And let's now revisit his journey into the dispensary and see what happens once he goes inside. Let's take a peek.